Hello, everybody. I'm Jonathan Stalick. I'm a professional homeopath. I've been practicing homeopathy for about almost 40 years now. I'm delighted to have Tim, who's here. He's a recent patient that I've been treating, and he's very kindly agreed to come and talk about the transformative power in his own real life experience of how homeopathy affected him. So, Tim, how old are you, and what do you do for work?
I'm 53 and I do an office job, um, doing IT stuff, IT support things. So it's not very exciting. It's, sat behind a desk for minimum of 8 hours a day. Um,
Right.
yeah.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. And so, what was your life before homeopathy? What were the challenges you were facing, especially related to, of course, Crohn's disease? So, what kind of things were you facing?
Well, in 2020, just before the pandemic, I went to a carvery in Wimbledon and I got dysentery, and it was so bad. I ended up in hospital on an IV drip with ciprofloxacin, which is one of the really bad heavy-duty antibiotics, caused a lot of problems, and it triggered Crohn's disease in me. So uh, I think I was in hospital about 6 times afterwards. Heart palpitations, and I had a bleeding ulcer, and things just got worse and worse and worse. Now, I'm also a master herbalist, and I've been trying to treat it with herbs for several years, and I kind of kept it at bay. Once I got onto this one remedy, slippery
What?
elm.
Yeah, a slippery elm. The main thing that's really
Slippery elm, yeah, I had to have it at least 3 times a day. Otherwise, I was, sort of on the loo up to 25 times a day. And
wow.
certain foods would trigger me, and I was bleeding internally. So there was a lot of blood, and it would just wipe me out. I was in bed for better part of, well, just over 2 years, I think, just not really able to live.
Okay, one of the things I remember, of course, was the huge effect on your diet, which was so limited. So, what foods couldn't you eat?
Uh,
Sensitivities.
So the worst things for me were lemon. So all citrus went out the window. Anything with even the tiniest amount of lemon in it would put me into bed for 5 or 6 days. So like hummus with a little bit of fresh lemon juice, that would put me in bed for 4 or 5 days.
Right.
I
Yeah.
had to be really, really careful. Someone gave me a little bit of a passion fruit yogurt. I was in bed for 2 weeks with that one. I only had a tablespoon for breakfast when I was staying over somewhere, and we looked on the ingredients, and there was concentrated lemon juice in it. So
Yeah.
lentils would really set me off. Couldn't have anything with lentils, anything with high fiber, chili, caffeine, chocolate was terrible for me. All dairy. So ended up going gluten free and dairy free. No tomatoes, no. The list is just, and eggs were one of the worst things. Eggs, even it was. I thought it would be the egg yolk, but it was the egg white that really set me off. So it was really restrictive. I basically couldn't go out to any restaurant. I couldn't go over to eat at anyone's home. If I did go and stay somewhere, I had to bring my own food or plan like a food delivery. Like I go down to my friend's place in the seaside, and I'd have to bring things with me to make sure that I didn't end up in bed those days that I was away.
So, in terms of just enjoying life, it
No
completely.
travel, no sports, couldn't really go out because I had to be near a loo all the time.
Right. Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
just felt so awful. I was really drained, and I lost. I mean, with Crohn's, you can easily lose 35 pounds in six
Yeah.
weeks.
Yeah.
So there are times when I would eat like king prawns were the thing that was safest for me, and I would eat like a king prawn every other day, just one. So I
Yeah.
got very, very thin, and then
Yes.
when you could eat, you'd put some weight back on and hope that it didn't happen again. So it was really terrible. No, I haven't left the country for a couple of years because I couldn't get on a plane or face going to a hotel and then getting sick from the water or the food. It just wasn't worth it.
In fact, I mean, I actually have some personal experience of Crohn's disease. That my mother suffered from Crohn's, or suffering from a young age. She had Crohn's, but she, of course, in those days, and she didn't know anything about homeopathy, and she, had an operation, of course, they take a part of your bowel out,
Yeah.
and of course that then results in lifelong diarrhea and all kinds of other sort of
Yeah.
issues. So thankfully, you hadn't gone down that route, so you still were intact. So that was a good thing. Now, how did you come across homeopathy then, and what sort of, yeah, piqued your interest in that?
Well, funny enough, I started to study homeopathy years ago, but the homeopathic college closed down sort of a year and a half into study. So I switched to herbs and naturopathy,
I see.
and I've always used homeopathy. I mean, from I think from age 20 or so. So I know what the powers are. I know that it can just, it doesn't matter what conventional medicine tells you this is incurable or you can never be able to treat this. Homeopathy can just turn it around on, right on the.
So I mean, did you have initial expectations, when deciding to try homeopathy, or what were your?
No, I had a completely open mind, but I just told myself, homeopathy is going to cure this. I know it.
Oh, right.
I know it. Because I had tried everything else. And I told the GPs that they will never put me on horrible drugs or take part of my body away because that's not what was needed to heal me.
So
Clearly, because it's happened.
you had tremendous faith, actually. I mean, in spite of horrendous, symptoms and experience of the disease, you had enormous faith, which I'm sure was also, well, helpful, at least in leading you down a good path for you.
I think
Um,
that, because homeopathy is energy, you have got to go into it with good energy. You have to believe that this is going to work with me. My body's going to accept this and agree with it
I will
and work
just
with it.
I will just say though that because I've treated, although faith is a lovely thing, I have treated patients who did not believe in it, who came because their wife sent them to me,
This
and
is
they
true.
and they
Yeah.
and they had no belief in it whatsoever, and they did incredibly well. So just to say that you don't have to have that.
This
It's
is
one,
true, but it probably helps
yeah, it was
to
good though.
want to do it. Yeah.
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 So what was the pre-treatment process in your experience? And were there initial reactions or changes you noticed, or what was the treatment process?
Well, we started off by trying some things that just it caused a lot of emotional release in me because I had some childhood trauma that from grief that still hadn't completely been resolved. That was holding me back from some other areas of my life. And so it brought those things to the surface and resolved them, but it didn't touch any of the physical Crohn's related, the dietary symptoms. So
I mean, you mentioned. I mean, that's obviously we're treating the whole person, so the emotional aspect is incredibly important. So even though that remedy didn't touch the Crohn's, but so what did you come away with though from that remedy, and what process did you go through? I mean, that was quite an emotional release, I believe.
yeah, so it sort of came in the middle of the night in dream form, like sort of like a lucid dream that then I actually woke because of it and I remembered all of it. So it was the death of a grandmother who ended up raising me because my mom gave me to my grandparents, and when she passed, it was really really difficult for me. And I remember with the remedy with that dream, I was sort of back there at the coffin, and I saw all of these old memories come up and symbols and things, and they all meant something to me. And I sobbed and I sobbed. I hadn't ever released it, I hadn't cried.
Right,
And
right.
so, 33, 34 years later, there I am, releasing it. So it was quite powerful.
And then after that, which is, that was amazing. I mean, that was great. But obviously, we did want to really do something with the Crohn's disease. That was the main reason why you came to see me. And you had I gave you another remedy, and then you had quite a reaction, didn't you, to that? Can you describe that?
Oh yeah, it was the Johnenium or something. It was and then I looked it up before I took it. I said, oh, it's meant for Crohn's disease. And I thought, oh wow, okay, so let's take this. I took that one pill in the morning, and by evening I had such a return of symptoms. I was in agony. I ended up taking painkillers for a couple of days, but I knew that homeopathy will often bring a return of symptoms, bring something to the surface. And so I just stuck with it. I mean, I didn't have a choice. There was no way to, to stop it once it was put into motion. And I thought, oh my God, what have I done? I've really stirred, I've gone and stirred this up now. And I think it took about 5 days, and then it all just disappeared. And I thought, okay, I mean, just as suddenly as it started, it disappeared.
So I'm just going to,
And
before you go on, I just want to explain to the viewers that about that remedies can bring back old symptoms. And in fact, these symptoms, I believe, were very similar to what you'd experienced when you first got the dysentery. You
oh,
know,
absolutely, it was the doubling over in pain,
yeah,
sweating, laying in bed. Oh, the cramping was really, really terrible. But there was no blood. I wasn't bleeding inside. It didn't
right.
cause me to bleed. But all of the symptoms associated with a really bad episode that would typically include
Yeah,
bleeding were there. All the pain and the discomfort, the
yeah.
sweating, the heart palpitation, and the just completely exhausted
And
after a couple of days of this.
okay, just to explain again, this is the way the body sometimes needs to process something, and it's almost like it hasn't fully processed the uh, original impetus or the original disease that you suffer. You've actually only partially resolved that, and so the remedy actually fully resolves that, and it gets the body to really go through that. It's not normally actually quite as intense as you experience. Most people get a sort of like a spring clean effect. They'll get a sort of like a sweating or a little bit of diarrhea or whatever. But you had quite intense, quite
But
intense.
Crohn's disease is it's a pretty intense, horrible thing. So yeah, I mean, it's not like most other things. It is very uncomfortable. But yeah, I did have quite a reaction, and then it just stopped. So I thought, um, you know what? I had such a reaction to it. I'm gonna try foods that trigger me, and I
Right.
did. And I had chorizo, which would normally knock me
Well,
out
hang on.
because
Let's just because I got I think an email from you saying I've just eaten lasagna with tomatoes. I think that was the
oh,
first one.
that's right, yeah, yeah.
Just had lasagna with tomatoes, and you said, and all I got was a pimple on my chin.
Yeah, that's right. I forgot about that. It was, yeah. Because normally the tomato, that was a no-no. I couldn't have red meat. I couldn't have the cheese. I couldn't have the noodles. And I'm from a Sicilian family, so some friends like me to cook lasagna for them all the time. And so I made one, and I thought I'm going to try a little bit of this one because it was so nice. It looked so nice, and it was wonderful. And I didn't have any reaction at all. I just couldn't believe it. I thought, well, we've definitely hit on something here.
What would that have done then in the old days then before the homeopathy?
I would have bled. I would have had bleeding, and I would have been in bed for a couple of weeks. Well, at
Right,
least at least a week. Yeah.
right,
So
amazing.
there would have been a considerable punishment for doing that, for trying it.
Then
And then I
what?
thought, wow, I can do this. Let me try my old enemy lentils. So I got some of these lentil crisp things. I went to the office. I'm back at work at the office and everything. And instead of, there's one of the few things that I could have is like salted crisps. And I thought, well, I'll try these lentil chips. And I had in the entire bag. Nothing happened at all.
You
So the
described that as
next day,
horror food, didn't you?
yeah, 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 it was one of the worst things ever. And then I thought, okay, right, I'm gonna try lemon because that would definitely put me in bed for a couple of weeks. So I made um, fresh guacamole and put lots of lemon in it and a little bit of chili, and nothing happened.
Wow,
So I thought, wow, this is amazing. I am actually eating everything that I couldn't eat before. The only
that's
thing I
really
haven't tried yet is alcohol, but I mean, I'm
nice.
not really fussed
That's nice.
about that. So yeah, but I did say the other day, I think, well, I think I really fancy a glass of wine, and I bet I could probably tolerate that now. In fact, I'm sure I could.
I'll be interested to hear. So how's your life changed post, treatment, this treatment, and physically and
Oh my
emotionally?
goodness, I have been eating 3 meals, sometimes four a day, just because I can. I mean, for 2 years, I was on this really bland, restrictive diet, and I've been wanting to have flavor. I've been wanting to have some pleasure and things. I've been to a couple of restaurants. I'm going out. I'm far more active because I don't have to worry about being near a toilet all the time.
Yes, yes, yes.
It's just been so liberating. It's like I've got my life back, and people have told me, "Wow, you've really got your life back. You've got a spark in your eyes. You've got there's a smile in your voice, and there really is. I'm really ready to live again. I'm making plans to travel, so it's game on again.
That's fantastic. That's so good to hear. So what would you say? Obviously, there may be people out there now, like watching this video, who are kind of a little bit skeptical about homeopathy. Obviously, there are a lot of homeopathy skeptics out there. So, what would you say to somebody who's a little bit skeptical about considering
Well, look,
homeopathy treatment
the
option?
NHS wanted to remove part of my colon. They wanted to cut me open and remove part of me, and it wouldn't have fixed anything, and it wouldn't have stopped any of the bleeding. Herbs only took it part of the way, but there, I was on slippery elm for over a year, and it only sort of it was like a plaster. And
Yes.
look at what homeopathy did. One time, well, I did repeat it after 7 days. You asked me to repeat it, and I had 2 days of discomfort, and then completely gone. So, two little pills have given me back my old life. I'm
Yeah.
I'm free. I'm liberated. It really it works with the body's energy to restore health.
And I should say,
Wonderful.
I mean, it's not always, when you have somebody with multiple sensitivities like you had, it's not always easy, even with homeopathy, to get to the root of that and to really cause a major shift. So, but so it's been a revelation for me as well that you've had this wonderful reaction and that you're so much improved. So, any sort of final words of reflection or anything else you'd like to share before we finish this video?
Um, I mean, I'm just testament to how homeopathy can completely change someone's state of health. Absolutely took me from
Fine.
being a
Yeah, of
prisoner
course.
in my own
Yeah.
body to
Mm.
being liberated and restored to my natural state of health. I mean, it's just wonderful. I'm also very surprised. I didn't think that it was going to happen. This one little pill, and then about 3 days into all of this, the awful initial return of symptoms, I thought it's really doing something. I'll tell you what. So then I kind of knew that we hit on something big.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I always tell patients that to expect. It doesn't always happen. Sometimes people just sail through and they just get better. Sometimes, though, the body does need to. It's like process something, and so it's not quite normally as intense. But when something like that happens, it actually is a really good sign. And when people, I mean, people hate it when I say, "Oh, great, you've got an aggravation. This is a really good sign." But it's true, and it's often followed by amazing relief, and yeah, so it's a good thing. So look, I want to thank you, Tim, for sharing your experience. It's been a real pleasure, and it is a pleasure treating you and seeing your changes, and that's been
I
fantastic.
want to thank you for restoring my health. I mean, uh, I was just a shell of a human, and now I'm back in the driver's seat again. I want to thank you for doing this wonderful work with me. Thank you so much.
Very, very welcome. And anyone who's interested in homeopathy and wants to maybe find out a little bit more, I do offer actually a free 30-minute chat where you can just tell me all your issues, well, and we can go into it and see whether maybe homeopathy would be a suitable path for you. So there'll be a link in the below the video, and do feel free to book in for this free session, introductory session. Thanks once again, Tim, and
Thank
I'm sure
you.
I'll be seeing you soon.
All right. Thank you.
Bye for now.
Bye bye.